Frank, welcome to Free Your Voice.
Hey, Dustin, it's nice to see you again. How are you?
I am doing well, and a lot has happened in your life since the last time we were together. You have a new book. Talk about it.
Yeah, I finally allowed my arm to be twisted strongly enough to write it, and I'm actually glad I did because it was a great way to put my thoughts on paper. And when you have to do that and reduce it to 30 or 40,000 words, I mean, you have to be able to think clearly and in a disciplined way about what's going on in your mind, and in order to convey it. So I'm really glad I did it, and Michael Casey was a great partner in that endeavor, and I also wanted a tool, quite frankly, to elevate this issue around the harms of technology, and create a call to action, if you will, something that will get people more aware of what's going on, and more, not just concerned about it, but quite frankly outraged by it, and really feel like we need to do something about this, and we need to do it quickly.
So, do you find that there's this attack on freedom or freedom of speech?
I actually find that there's an attack on all of our freedoms. I, as I say in the book, my forebears, came to this country to escape subjecthood and enter citizenship. And what's happening in the world of big tech and in the digital era we live in is we're being stripped of our citizenship, and we're becoming subjects again. It's just, instead of men and women in robes and crowns, it's these feudal lords that really own us now. And make no mistake, in this digital world where the technology is ubiquitous and we're being surveilled 24/7, and the data that is scraped from us is being aggregated and used, and by these platforms in ways that they decide to use it, not how we decide to use it, where they own us. So, Dustin, I hate to break the news, but you don't own you right now.
But
They
then I
own you.
have to ask you that then, because shouldn't we have a choice of what's allowed in a search engine about us? Shouldn't we have a choice? And Frank, you're a very successful man, and unfortunately, people like to use that against you. And so when I look up your name, it talks about this moment in your life that has happened in the moment of countless millions of people around the world's lives of a divorce. Yet it's not in the news, it's not making front page, but because of who you are, because of being influential, it's there. Shouldn't you have a choice that it's not written about you online?
Yeah, I think for sure, we all deserve that choice, and it's interesting that you highlight that, because that was my first epiphany here. And I went through this experience in late 2009 through early 2012, and which was horrible. On a personal level, I got divorced. It was public. I was in LA. I was actually on the receiving end of what? Social media, because the iPhone had come out in '09, the Facebook was 5 years old, and this whole thing was emerging, and I saw it and I felt it more than saw it, because you feel helpless, because you can just be attacked by anyone who has an agenda, or wants to do harm. And again, I'm not saying it so people feel sorry for me. Please don't. I'm doing great, even that episode ended positively for me, but it was unfair. It was, and more than unfair for me. I mean, I was the one getting divorced. It was unfair for my children, and they had to bear the brunt of it. And now you go on a search engine, and that episode, which is like one episode in a life. I'm 70 years old. I've done a lot of different things in my life, and that was an unfortunate moment, and I bear responsibility. But I'm a human being,
And you're
right? And
making money, right, off of somebody going on their website, or at least clicking on those links. That there's an agenda. There's a reason why they're writing this stuff.
you're a member of the media. You know how it works. Search engine optimization is how things have progressed. I remember an era. Let's go back to the Dodgers, when I owned the Dodgers, where we would post something on our own website, hoping that, but by the way, something true, hoping that mainstream media would pick it up, and then it would suddenly be it would be mainstream, right? Within a matter of a few years, what was happening is mainstream media was looking at what was trending on social media to decide what the headline should be. So the whole world turned upside down. And what trends on social media is oftentimes not true,
But it's
extreme, and
dangerous,
and and
Frank. I
and
mean,
under.
isn't it quite dangerous for our humanity to rely on what's trending in the feel of the day?
Well, of course it is, which is why we're in the shape we're in right now. When I say we, I mean society and democracies and families and kids. We've been destabilized by this monster, and the monster is a tech architecture which surveils us 24/7, scrapes our data, aggregates it with others, and then applies algorithms to not only sell us things, but manipulate us, trigger us, and predict how we're going to react to things. It's very dangerous, and it's destabilizing us. And we can focus on just the fact that we don't have civil discourse anymore. We can focus on the fact that democracies are literally failing, or we can focus, which I would say is the immediate problem, on the health of young children. Young children are living, we're stealing their childhoods from them because they're anxious, they're depressed, they think about suicide, many are committing suicide. This is a crisis of epidemic proportions, and we need to address it. And we now know that these platforms, and I'm talking now social media platforms, know the damage they're doing. They're targeting kids, they're predatory platforms, and yet we let this go on. This is unacceptable, and we need to address it immediately.
And why aren't these CEOs being held accountable without naming names? You and I don't have any problems against us. Why aren't they being held accountable? Because if you're making profit off of exploiting other human beings, children who cannot defend themselves, shouldn't there be somebody held accountable?
Of course, in the normal world, meaning the pre-digital era, we would look to our political leadership to take action. If it was, for instance, regarding the harms of tobacco, once they became known, right, that smoking was in fact addictive, and the and smoking was in fact harmful to your health. Okay, once those things were determined, then our political leadership went into gear to do something about it, and to regulate the industry, and to educate people so that they were aware of this. Now roll the clock forward. We have something far more heinous, far more damaging than tobacco, that's addicting all of us and hurting all of us, and yet our political leadership is not dealing with it. So why? And I would say take your pick. Either they're taking lots of money from these big companies and therefore compromised, or they don't understand the harms of this technology, giving them the benefit of the doubt, and so they too need to be educated, or they're using these platforms to raise money and get reelected because they too have understood that extreme behavior on these platforms gets extremists interested in giving candidates money. If you look at the social media following of, pick your candidate or your personality, the most extreme have the most followers, the most moderate and ones that probably reflect your thinking and my thinking generally don't have the number of followers, because we've created an environment that actually rewards disinformation and misinformation. It's a liar's dividend. We've created an ecosystem where there's no penalty for misinformation, and it's all just a free for all. And we need to fix it. And this is why I make the point: it's an infrastructure problem. It's an engineering problem. I'm an engineer. I'm a builder from a family of 5 generations of builders. Let's go to the bottom of the stack. Let's address the infrastructure design flaw, and let's fix this so the tech can work for good as opposed to for chaos.
You said so much, so I need to dissect some of that because you talked about building, that there is still a need to build. So you're not drawing the line and saying, "Look, we have it right now." You're creating a path going forward, and you're asking others to unite with you, and you're putting your own money on the line to do this.
Let's stipulate. I am pro building. I am pro technology. I am pro-capitalism. I am for all of these things. However, I am against technology and businesses that are ruining everything I love, that are harming children, that are destroying society, that are destabilizing and undermining democracies. That's what I'm against. And so, yes, I've committed $500 million to this enterprise in order to build out a project which has a tech solution at its core, but it's also a project that's engaged academic institutions that come forward with research and good policies, that has an alliance of organizations around the world that are deeply concerned about this issue, because this is certainly not an issue that I'm alone concerned about. This is fortunately now becoming almost mainstream, right? That people are seeing the problems, and it's a project that knows that there needs to be a commercial ecosystem that develops here in order to credibly build an alternative to the current tech architecture. If when you think about migration and think about it in a human physical sense, people leave where they live if two things are happening. One, where they live is no longer habitable. It's just beyond, they can't stand it anymore. And two, they have a place to go. So people are learning that the current tech architecture and social media platforms in particular are no longer habitable, but they need a place to go. We need to build the alternative. And that's not going to be just us. That's going to be millions of builders. And I would argue that the new data sharing economy will dwarf what we have now. And we know the data is valuable, don't we? Because these 5, 6 companies are worth trillions and trillions of dollars.
I mean, that's mind-blowing numbers, bigger than some economies around the world. I mean,
Yeah,
one
these are the
company
biggest,
could be worth $1 trillion, Frank.
multiple trillions, in some cases. These are mind-boggling numbers. These are the largest and most powerful companies that ever created. And what are they created on? The backs of us, our data. Our data. It's our data. It should be owned and controlled by us. We need an internet rather than clicking on the terms and conditions of use of these big platforms and giving up our rights. We need an internet where the new apps are clicking on our terms of use for our data.
What I'm hearing you say, and this is the way that I'm interpreting and I'm going to use a simple explanation for our audience, is if someone were to go online to look for information about you, like you should have the ability to own that. I mean, if it's about you, it's your name, your brand, the things you've done, that there has to be some human element. If we look at you and say you're the asset, because the data mining component is happening, they are mining you, everything about you, and they are making money and profiting off of it. You get nothing. They're not sending Frank. Now, I'm not saying, Frank, you need the money, but they're not sending these individuals around the world that they're exploiting and taking advantage of. They're not lowering their credit card bills. They're not lowering the cost of their goods that they're purchasing and saying, thank you so much we're going to give you some sort of reward here, that they're stealing.
Stealing is a good word. That's how I look at it. These platforms are basically stealing our data. And by the way, when I say data, please don't think of it as some abstract thing, which is like, and kind of react. I don't really care about my data. No. Think about it as your personhood in the digital age. Your data is you. It's as important as the biological DNA you're born with. Your data is your lived experience. It's your digital DNA. It's everything about you. So why on earth would you give that up? Let me zoom out a little bit in answering your question. These large, we talk a lot about generative AI, right? This is the same technology that is currently being used and is fundamentally broken and is breaking us. And yet we're even thinking about letting a more powerful version of it out into the world. I would argue strongly that we need to fix the technology stack, fix the infrastructure, and then unleash the next more powerful version where individuals now have agency over their data and can share in the economic benefits. When we think about what's happening now without any change in course, these large machines are ingesting all of human creativity, everything that's digitizable, right? So every book, every manuscript, every medical journal, every thesis, every academic treatise, and everything that's ever been on the internet, right? And all of the static stuff, all of the books and so forth, that they've been ingested a long time ago. What's being ingested today? All of the activity on the internet, all of our data. Who's generating it? Us, right? So think about this. These large language models are taking all the information we all are creating for the benefit of a few companies. By the way, the same companies, the only ones that can benefit from AI, or the ones that will benefit the most, are the big platforms with the large data sets and the large compute power. So wouldn't we want an internet where our data is attributable to us? The provenance of our data is ours. We get to decide what to do with that data. In other words, we permission its use as opposed to just have it stolen from us. And we can rescind that permission if we don't like how it's being used. And if there's an economic benefit, we benefit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this isn't a matter of not wanting to see the data aggregated. Of course we do. We want to cure diseases more quickly. We want people to live longer, healthier lives. And I'm sure that in an internet with integrity and trust restored, people will share things about themselves. It may be on an anonymous basis, but they'll share it if it has a common good, a public good, because it's going to make people's lives much, much better, but not the direction we're headed.
Project Liberty, what does it mean to you?
Everything. It's why I've dedicated the next decade or more of my life to it. Look, I've led a privileged life. I was, you know, I was born into a great family, awesome parents, great siblings, learned great lessons growing up. I was, by the way, the mistakes I made, I was able to recover from, which sadly it's hard to do in the world of social media, where everything is recorded and so forth. And I had the benefit of a great education. I came from a family, as I said, of builders. So I love building things. I love solving problems. So I was able to dive into all that. I had this moment back that we talked about in LA where I said, whoa, something's happening in the world here that's very different and could fundamentally change the kind of life I had in the past, in the future. Not only my life, obviously, everybody's lives. And now we've seen that come to be. Millions and millions of people are being impacted negatively by social media platforms and this data extraction technology that we have. I was able to start a public policy school in Washington, D.C. with Georgetown University, hoping perhaps naively that we could put policies in place to rein in these monsters. And I learned very shortly thereafter that no, we need to fix the fundamental technology. And so as a person who, for whatever reason, was able to identify this problem and identify a solution, I now can't unsee it, having
Yeah.
seen it.
Well, you said something interesting there at the end. And I've been told about myself quite a few times that I'm naive. Is that a bad thing?
I think it's an awesome thing. And I think we need more naivete in the world. I think kids right now are having their youth, their adolescence stolen from them. We want kids to be curious and naive and innocent and open. And now what we're doing is, we're creating a generation of kids whose brains are literally being rewired because of these dopamine hits and this addictive nature of social media. Their view of the world is being skewed completely because they're being fed information, much of it totally false. But how do they know it's false? We, at least growing up, I was able to trust to a large degree the news I was receiving. And when it wasn't correct, it was called out and it was a scandal, right? Now we have an information ecosystem that is totally, totally and utterly contaminated. And what it's doing is spoiling the naivete and the innocence and kind of the developmental stage of young men and women. And worse than that, if they make a mistake, if they write something stupid on social media or they text something, that they weren't thinking clearly, but they hit send. They can't rescind it, and it's there forever,
Forever.
forever. Imagine when we were young, some of the silly, innocent, stupid things we did that in retrospect we felt badly that we did them. We didn't mean to hurt
It
anybody, and
wasn't there, Frank. You're
yeah,
right. We weren't being watched. That
yeah,
the worst of us would always be highlighted. The moments of I didn't know or I shouldn't have done that. That how can you know as a child what is right or wrong when most adults, their morals and ethics swing in the wind? I mean, you can go into any social media platform and find the first person that's wearing something around their neck from a cross to something else that, and some of the behaviors that they have, I'd say I wouldn't do that. That's not good. So morality is an issue to begin with. But now what you're saying to me is that our children are now forevermore going to be impacted because of this behemoth that is never going to let them be forgiven. It's always going to hold it out there against them like they just did it today. Yet it could
yeah.
have been something that was
And is
30
it?
years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And is it going to highlight the great things that they did, or
No.
the beautiful messages they sent
Go
to a?
online and look up your name. And obviously, the first thing that points up is the thing that had the most clicks, that's the most detrimental to your brand. You're right, Frank. That is a problem. But why don't we do something about it? Why don't
Well,
more people?
that's our intention with Project Liberty, um, and let me say, Dustin, I really appreciate you bringing this forward and reading the book, and socializing this issue further, and I hope that thousands and then millions of people start to engage in this work, because this is our biggest fight. It's not my biggest fight, it's our biggest fight. We need to get together and demand a fix to this, because technology, the digital era, the internet, call it what you will, is not going away. Right? This is part of our lives now, and it should be a beautiful, reinforcing, optimizing for health of kids, optimizing for strength of democracy, optimizing for civil discourse piece of technology. Look, if I asked you to give me three words or phrases that would describe democracy, would you say centralized, autocratic, surveillance based? I don't think
I
so. And
wouldn't. I
that's
would
the
say that
tech.
sounds very Orwellian to me.
Yeah, and it's so the tech we have, which is centralized, autocratic, and surveillance based, is awesome if you're an autocracy. So this technology works well in China. Okay, but is that what we're striving for in democratic societies? I don't think so. If we're going to have thriving democracies which respect individuals' rights, their human rights, and in turn, each of us respect those same rights in other people, i.e., the social contract, then we need technology that optimizes for those rights, not technology that optimizes for clicks, time online, and ads for a few big platforms. It's as simple as that. We need to fix the tech, and then we can move on. If you ask kids right now, is your life going to be better than your parents? Polls show the kids say no. Children say no. It's not, and parents agree that, oh, we should have technology, and we can within 5 years. Where if you ask a child, is your life going to be better than the parents, and they're going to say, obviously yes, because I'm going to live to 150 years old and I'm going to be healthy the whole time, etc. And the parents would say the same thing. Isn't that what we want for our kids? Isn't that the most
Absolutely.
important thing for society?
That is
To,
how
to
we should leave this world. That is the greatest legacy. And that's what I hear from you, Frank, is that you do believe that you have an obligation, that we have an obligation to leave this world better than the way we found it. Even if it changed along the way, that we did everything we could to use our resources, our time, our human capital to make a difference, to make an impact. And that to me, Frank, that sums up everything I've ever known about you. And every time I've met you, is that you are all about impact.
well, why else are we here? And particularly when we're in a situation like I am, which is, uh, um, I have resources. What am I going to do with it? What am I here for? If if look, I was educated by Jesuits. It took in high school and college. Granted, it took a while for their message to get through my thick skull, but it finally did. And I understand that a life of purpose, a life of impact is more meaningful, more enjoyable, and more fulfilling than the opposite. And it makes me very happy and very joyful to be doing this work, even though it's difficult work and it's challenging works, and I'm not delusional. I know these big platforms are going to try to do whatever they do to maintain their stock price and their market share and this and that. And let me reiterate, I'm a capitalist. I think companies should be, allowed to create whatever value they can, obviously, but not at the expense of my kids, not at the expense of kids generally, not at the expense of democracy or civil society, and not at the expense of destroying our entire information ecosystem, which is from which we develop knowledge and trust and confidence in one another. You destroy trust, you destroy democracy. You destroy trust, you will eventually destroy capitalism. Mark my words. So let's address this. The beautiful thing and the positive and hopeful thing is this is an addressable problem. That's the message I want people to hear. I am here to say we have a big problem, but I'm not here to throw another log on that fire so people become more depressed about it. What I really want to highlight is we can solve this together and have technology that will do unbelievably amazing things for society, and it will strengthen democracy, and most importantly, it will give kids a leg up in the world so they can live lives better than ours.
Thank you so much, Frank, for sharing your story on Free Your Voice.
Dustin, pleasure being with you. I really appreciate your interest in this, and I welcome everybody to get involved. You can learn about Project Liberty at projectliberty.io, or you can go to ourbiggestfight.com.